Off the coast of the Pacific Ocean, just a few yards below the surface, under a rocky ledge, lies a creature that hasn't moved in 7 months. She doesn't eat. She doesn't hunt. She holds thousands of translucent strands of eggs aloft, running her arms over them day after day, fanning them with fresh water so oxygen can reach them. And over these months, she will lose nearly half her body weight. When the last egg splits open and a tiny hatchling the size of a grain of rice swims free, the mother won't follow her young. She won't be able to, because her body is physically programmed to stop at this exact moment. Somewhere near her eyes, there's a gland that works like a timer, counting down her life from the day she laid the final egg in her clutch. And when that timer hits 0, everything ends at once. This creature has 3 hearts, blue blood, and a brain that is, quite literally, spread across 8 arms, so that each one can think for itself, independent of the head. This is the octopus, and what you know about it is probably only a tenth of the whole story. Here's the strange part. We tend to think of intelligence as something that lives in one place, the head, where the brain gives orders and the body follows. But what if that's not the only way to think? What if a creature could have no single self at all, but 8 parallel selves, each one able to solve problems, taste through touch, and make decisions without any input from the head? And here's a more personal question. We're used to thinking of life as a path: childhood, adulthood, love, children, old age. But what if nature built a switch into your body that turns on irreversible decline the moment you've completed your one essential task, leaving offspring behind? Imagine your death is set in advance, like an alarm clock, programmed for a specific time before you were even born. The octopus lives exactly like that, with no old age in the sense we understand it. There's a childhood, one short peak in which it becomes one of the smartest creatures on the planet, and then an end that arrives almost immediately after the single encounter with a mate it will ever have. To understand how that's even possible, we have to start at the very beginning, the moment a creature the size of a pinhead hatches from its egg and sets out on a path evolution built completely differently from ours. A female octopus doesn't lay 1 egg or a dozen. Depending on the species, she can lay tens of thousands of eggs, and for some of the larger species, the count runs past 100,000. And she weaves them into clusters that look like bunches of grapes and hangs them from the ceiling of her den, a crevice in a rock, an empty shell, or a burrow dug into the sand. From that moment on, her life becomes a siege. She stops leaving her shelter, she stops eating, and for the next several months, for some species, this stretches to nearly 4.5 years, all she does is guard the clutch from predators and constantly wash the eggs with a current of water, so oxygen reaches the developing embryos and bacteria don't build up. She is, quite literally, slowly starving herself for creatures she will never see grow up. Of the thousands of eggs, only a handful will survive to adulthood. Most will become food for fish, crabs, and other predators while they're still drifting as larvae in open water. And that's the price of a strategy built on overwhelming numbers rather than close care. Even if only a small fraction survive, that's enough to carry the species forward. The hatchling that does survive doesn't behave anything like an adult. In many species, especially those that lay small eggs, it spends its first few weeks not on the seafloor, but drifting in open water among the plankton, a tiny translucent speck learning to swim and hunt creatures even smaller than itself. While in species with larger eggs, the hatchling settles on the bottom immediately and skips this stage. But the outcome is the same either way. It starts life alone, with no mother and no protection. And this is the most dangerous period of its life. Its mother will never see it, because by the time the clutch hatches, she is usually already dead, or her death is only days away. Here's the first strange detail, one we'll come back to a little later. The mother's body had been counting down to this moment all along, working like a built-in mechanism triggered inside her right after she lays her eggs, relentlessly driving toward the end exactly when her job is done, regardless of how much strength she has left. But to understand how that mechanism works, we first need to understand what an octopus actually is. Because from here on, everything about it starts to look like something from another planet. If you split the evolutionary tree in half, the branch that led to octopuses split off from the branch that led to us, at the very latest around 500 million years ago, and by some estimates, even earlier, when nothing on Earth resembled a fish or a human. The common ancestor was a simple, worm-like creature with no eyes and nothing resembling a brain as we know it, with no hint that one branch would eventually produce whales and people, while the other would produce creatures with 3 hearts. And the hearts really are worth discussing, literally. An octopus has 3 of them. 2 small hearts pump blood through the gills, loading it with oxygen, while the third, the main one, sends that oxygenated blood around the rest of the body. Here's a detail that usually slips by unnoticed. When an octopus is actively swimming rather than crawling along the bottom, its main heart temporarily stops beating, which is why octopuses are poor long-distance swimmers and prefer to crawl instead, saving their energy, since swimming, quite literally, wears out their circulatory system faster than walking on 8 arms does. The blood these hearts pump is blue. In humans, oxygen is carried by hemoglobin, an iron-based protein, which is why our blood is red. While in octopuses, that job belongs to hemocyanin, a copper-based protein. And in the cold, low-oxygen water where octopuses often live, hemocyanin works more efficiently than hemoglobin, which is why blue blood turns out to be a sound engineering solution for a creature living on the floor of cold seas. But the strangest system in an octopus is its nervous system. In humans, the vast majority of neurons sit inside the brain, while in an octopus, out of roughly 500 million neurons, only about a third are located in the central brain, and the rest are spread across the 8 arms, with each arm having its own nerve cluster, capable of processing signals from its suckers and triggering movement without waiting for instructions from above. This has been confirmed experimentally. If an arm becomes separated from the body, which sometimes happens during a predator attack, it will keep reacting to touch and even try to grab objects for some time afterward, because its own nerve cluster keeps working on its own for a while. And while an arm is still attached, it can feel, taste, and grab prey even while the octopus's head is occupied with something else entirely, like watching for danger or squeezing through a narrow gap. Speaking of taste, an octopus's suckers aren't just gripping tools. In 2020, a team of researchers at Harvard identified chemical receptors inside them that let the octopus literally taste whatever it touches, as if it had 8 tongues in addition to 8 arms. And it can feel a rock in the dark, sense that a crab is hiding underneath, and judge whether it's worth eating before it ever sees it. Put all of that together, and you get a creature whose mind isn't concentrated in one spot, but seems smeared across its entire body, the head making the strategic calls, while the arms handle tactical decisions on the spot, in parallel. Which raises an obvious question. If an octopus doesn't have a single command center in the way we're used to, what's actually happening when it thinks? And how does a mind built this strangely manage to solve problems that stump primates? The answer will become clear later, once our subject reaches the peak of its short life. But for now, it still has to grow up, and it has to do that completely on its own. Most social animals learn from their parents. A wolf pup watches the pack hunt. A lion cub spends years picking up the habits of the pride. But an octopus has neither. The moment a larva settles on the sea floor and becomes a small, bottom-dwelling octopus, it's entirely on its own. Its mother died before it even hatched, and its father vanished from its life long before that. Since in most species, males die within a few weeks or months of mating, never seeing their offspring. And everything an octopus knows as an adult, it learns through trial and error, alone. The first thing it learns almost immediately is camouflage. An octopus's skin contains special cells called chromatophores, each one a small sac of pigment surrounded by tiny muscles. And by contracting or relaxing those muscles, the octopus stretches or shrinks the pigment sacs, changing the color of its skin in a fraction of a second. While beneath the chromatophores sit two more layers of cells that reflect and bend light, letting the octopus mimic not just color, but texture too. The ripple of sand, the roughness of rock, the pattern of seaweed. And all of it is controlled directly by the nervous system, with no hormones involved. Which is why the color change happens almost instantly, faster than a human can blink. For a young octopus, camouflage is a matter of survival in the most literal sense. Its only line of defense in a world where predators far outnumber hiding spots. Moray eels, seals, large fish, and even other octopuses are ready to eat it at any moment. And it has almost nothing to fight back with, just a beak tucked at the base of its arms, and venomous saliva that's mild in nearly every species except a few. So its whole strategy comes down to one simple idea. Stay unnoticed, and if you are noticed, turn out to be something completely different from what you appeared to be. Alongside camouflage, the octopus learns to handle its own body. A body with not a single hard bone in it. It has no internal skeleton at all. The only rigid part is its beak, shaped like a bird's, tucked at the base of the arms, which means an octopus can squeeze through any gap as wide as its beak, an opening no bigger than a coin. And young octopuses quickly master this trick, finding shelter in places no predator with a bony skeleton could ever reach. By the time an octopus is a few months old, it's already a fully capable hunter, armed with camouflage, flexibility, and 8 arms, each able to act on its own. But the real test of its abilities comes later, once simple survival stops being enough and something else takes over. Something scientists cautiously but genuinely call intelligence. In 2008, staff at an aquarium in the German city of Coburg started noticing that light bulbs kept burning out and fuses kept blowing at night. And it took a while to find the cause. And when they did, they almost didn't believe it. An octopus named Otto, apparently bored with the same lighting every night, had been climbing to the edge of his tank and aiming a jet of water straight at the bulb above him, short-circuiting it. So staff caught it on camera and had to move the light farther from the water. To be fair, this story comes from news reports rather than a scientific paper, so it's worth treating as a vivid illustration rather than an established fact. But aquarium staff around the world describe similar episodes often enough that it's worth taking a closer look at how deliberate Otto's behavior really was. Other abilities are documented far more solidly. Octopuses open screw-top jars to reach food hidden inside, and this has been reproduced under controlled conditions many times. They take apart simple mechanical puzzles that require a sequence of several steps. And they recognize individual people. In a well-known experiment at the Seattle Aquarium, octopuses that were alternately fed by one staff member and irritated with a stiff brush by that same person responded to them differently weeks later, depending on whether that person had meant food or annoyance. There's an even more practical example of intelligence at work: tool use. Some octopus species pick up halves of coconut shells or mollusk shells and carry them around, stacking one inside the other to use later as a portable shelter, ducking inside at the first sign of danger. And it's one of the few documented cases in the wild among invertebrates that meets the scientific definition of tool use, where the object is carried ahead of time in anticipation of future benefit, and the moment it's actually used comes long after the moment it was picked up. This is worth connecting back to something from earlier: the arms that can act independently of the head, a structure that explains why an octopus, unlike most animals, can handle several tasks at once, almost as if it had more than one stream of attention running in parallel. One arm feels along a crevice in the rock, searching for a crab. A second keeps holding on to current prey. A third reacts to a shift in the current nearby, all without constantly reporting back to the central brain. And the brain steps in only for higher-level decisions, whether it's worth reaching into that crevice at all, whether the surroundings are safe, whether it's time to change color. This kind of mental architecture is rare in the animal kingdom, which is exactly why the octopus is so often called the closest thing on Earth to an alien intelligence, since it developed complex behavior along a completely independent evolutionary path, rather than inheriting it from ancestors with an advanced nervous system, the way vertebrates did. Even its eyes, despite looking structurally similar to ours, with a cornea, a lens, and a retina, are built differently at the cellular level. And unlike us, an octopus has no blind spot because the nerve fibers from its retina don't cross through it. They run straight back instead, and two branches of evolution, having split 500 million years ago, arrived independently at a similar engineering solution: a lens-based camera eye, simply because the laws of optics are the same for everyone. All of this makes the octopus, without exaggeration, one of the most capable problem solvers on the planet relative to the size of its nervous system. And it's right at this peak, at around 1 year old, or 2 to 3 years for some species, that its biology takes a sharp, irreversible turn. Because an octopus's mental prime lasts exactly until the one and only encounter of its life. Octopuses are solitary for nearly their entire lives. They don't form pairs, don't live in groups, avoid each other's territory, and often attack one another on sight if the size difference allows it. And the one moment two adult octopuses deliberately come together is the mating season. And even that happens without anything resembling romance as we understand it. Males have a modified arm called the hectocotylus, adapted to transfer packets of sperm to the female. In some species, like argonauts, the male is so much smaller and so vulnerable during mating that he simply detaches this arm and sends it swimming to the female while he stays at a safe distance. And the arm swims off and completes its job entirely on its own, which shows just how independent an octopus's body parts really are from one another, even during something as critical as reproduction. In most other species, the process is less extreme, but the outcome is the same. After mating, the male typically survives only a few weeks or months, growing weaker and losing interest in food until he dies. What happens to the female is more complex and, oddly enough, far better studied. In 1977, researcher Jerome Wodinsky ran an experiment that became one of the key pieces of evidence explaining why female octopuses die shortly after laying their eggs. Since octopuses, like some other cephalopods, have an organ called the optic gland, a small structure near the eyes that works a lot like the pituitary gland in vertebrates, regulating hormone levels. And Wodinsky found that if this gland is surgically removed from a female right after she lays her eggs, she doesn't die the way she normally would. Instead, she lives far longer than usual, starts eating again, and even stops guarding her clutch as fiercely as before. In other words, a female octopus's death after reproduction isn't simply the result of starvation or random exhaustion. It's triggered by a specific hormonal signal from that very gland. A script written in advance, one that plays out regardless of the circumstances. For the science of aging, this discovery mattered. It showed that decline after reproduction in animals isn't always a matter of the body wearing out. Sometimes, it's a built-in, genetically programmed mechanism that switches on, like a timer, the moment the main biological task is complete. This is where the circle closes, back to where this story began. A female octopus, having mated once in her life, only once, begins preparing for the final act of her short existence. Months without movement, without food, all so she can give life to thousands of creatures she will never see grow up. And everything we've learned about her mind, her independently thinking arms, her ability to outsmart aquarium wiring and solve puzzles, all of it plays out and fades within one single, remarkably short life cycle. But one question is still left unanswered. If nature is capable of building such a precise countdown to death into an organism, why would it do that at all? Why not let an octopus, with all its intelligence, adaptability, and problem-solving skill, live longer and possibly reproduce more than once? To understand that, we need to stop looking at the biology of a single animal and look instead at the survival math of the species as a whole, which is exactly where the final part of this story begins. Here's the answer to the question from a moment ago: why nature built such a precise timer in the first place. An octopus has no pack, no parents to feed its young, no way to pass down experience, and the only capital the species can invest in the future is the quantity and quality of a single clutch of eggs. Whatever energy the female might otherwise spend trying to survive and reproduce again, instead goes entirely into her current clutch. Months of guarding without food raise the odds that each individual egg makes it to hatching. And biologists call this terminal investment, an everything all at once strategy, instead of a little but for a long time one. For a species that will never pass anything on to its offspring except its genes, this turns out to be a more efficient use of a limited energy budget than stretching that energy out over years for a shot at a second attempt. Most octopus species live somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. Even the largest ones, like the giant Pacific octopus, which can grow to an arm span of roughly 16 feet, rarely live past 4 or 5 years in total. And most of that time goes toward growth rather than adult life. While, for comparison, a parrot or a tortoise with a similar level of intelligence can live for decades, building up experience gradually. And an octopus's entire journey, from hatchling to death, fits into roughly the same span of time it takes a person to finish school. And it's exactly this compression that makes its story genuinely dramatic, rather than just a collection of biological facts. By the time her clutch hatches, the mother hasn't touched food in months. But starvation alone isn't the whole story behind her death. The optic gland triggers her decline on its own schedule, regardless of whether she has access to food or not. And even if prey were sitting right next to her, her instinct to guard the eggs and the hormonal mechanism driving her decline would carry things through to the end anyway, which is how evolution solved the problem for a species whose young have to survive entirely on their own from day one. It's worth returning now to the questions raised at the very start. We asked, what happens if a mind isn't concentrated in one place, but spread across 8 independently thinking arms? And the answer is clear now. You get a creature capable of handling several tasks at once, but unable to pass its accumulated knowledge on to the next generation, because it simply doesn't have the time or the social structure to do so. And every new generation of octopuses starts from zero, relying only on instinct and its own ability to learn alone within a few short months. And we asked about a built-in death timer, one that activates the moment an organism completes its main task. In female octopuses, this has been confirmed experimentally, the optic gland near the eyes quite literally switches on the decline process right after the eggs are laid. And in males, the outcome is the same: death within weeks or months of mating, though scientists haven't established with the same certainty whether their decline is driven by this same gland or by a different mechanism. Either way, the result is identical. The entire life of this remarkably intelligent, curious, resourceful creature fits into the short stretch between two events: being born from thousands of siblings that didn't survive, and a programmed ending that arrives right after it has given rise to the next generation. What emerges is a cycle that's both vicious and, in its own way, remarkably well designed. Solitude from the very first day of life, a rapid rise in intelligence with no one to pass it on to, a single encounter with another of its kind, and an ending built into the organism in advance, part of a design evolution refined over millions of years for one single purpose: giving the next generation a chance. If it seems to you that having a mind spread across 8 arms sounds more like an advantage than a strangeness, let me know in the comments which arm you think would be the smartest one. And if the story of the optic gland and the built-in ending is what really got you, hit like and tell me what you think. Is nature shutting a female octopus down after a single act of reproduction cruelty? Or is it evolution at its most efficient? I read every comment, and I'll respond to the best theories.